Welcome to Sir Nightshade, where true horror stories are brought to life. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to hear more chilling tales every day. Thank you. Now let's begin. This happened a long time ago. Right from the start, I should be clear, I hate camping. No, hate isn't strong enough. I loathe it. I wasn't born for this kind of thing. It's not just the obvious stuff. The grit and grime clinging to your skin, crawling into places you know you won't be able to wash for days. Or the constant whining buzz of insects treating you like an all-you-can-eat buffet. It's the feeling of it. That crawling sensation, like 100 invisible, tiny legs skittering over your skin in the thick darkness. The cold dampness that doesn't just seep in, it pierces bass right down to the bone, clinging to your clothes. And those endless nights, curled up inside a musty, mildew-scented sleeping bag that dash by 3A somehow transforms into a coffin filled with gravel. And the tragedy is, I've been camping more times than I can count, never once by choice. My dad was a believer. You know the type, flannel shirt as second skin, worships the wilderness kind of guy. He truly believed that suffering on purpose was a virtue. In his mind, disconnecting from technology meant punishing yourself as much as humanly possible for 48 hours straight. Sleeping on the ground, feeding mosquitoes, that was sacred to him, a rite of manhood. And every summer, I got dragged along, like some kind of offering, with his equally tough buddies. By the time I hit 10th grade, I'd had enough. I was done with the silent misery, done with the lectures about building character. I begged, pleaded, with him to let me bring a friend, a human shield, someone to make the suffering just a little less unbearable. To my shock, he agreed instantly. I think, deep down, he believed another boy might toughen up his soft, ungrateful son. And that's how Charles came into the picture, at first glance. Bringing Charles was a terrible idea. He was a seasoned Boy Scout, badges, knots, the whole deal, and he actually loved this stuff. But Charles was decent. Sure, he teased me endlessly about hating camping. But thank God, he wasn't the if you don't love nature you re a sissy type. Besides, I figured, if I had to suffer, I'd rather suffer with someone who could build a real fire and pitch a tent that wouldn't collapse overnight. He jumped at the invitation, partly because he enjoyed it, but mostly because, back then, he'd take any excuse to get out of his house. Unfortunately, this trip was doomed before it even began. The trouble started the moment we turned off the highway. One of my dad's friends, the so-called planner, had booked the wrong site. And not just a little wrong. Instead of the remote, rugged, manly wilderness my dad adored, we ended up at a cheap, overdeveloped, commercial campground. Picture this, indoor bathrooms reeking of bleach and urine, neat little paved walkways lit by suburban-style street lamps. And, in the distance, the shrill, manic screams of children at a nearby playground. This wasn't camping. This was a disaster version of glamping, before the word even existed. My dad's face went dark, like someone had just spat right at him. Saying he was upset doesn't even come close. His whole body went rigid. He stared at the tiny check-in booth like it was an open wound. But the real irony hadn't even arrived yet. A few hours later, after we'd unpacked and the adults were still fuming, we discovered what lay beyond the fence next to our site. A theme park. I'm not kidding. A full-blown amusement park. We could see the metal skeleton of a Ferris wheel, the bare steel arches of a roller coaster jutting above the treetops. Of course, the park was closed. The lights were off. Those massive, silent structures stood there in the dimming twilight, motionless, lifeless. They didn't look like rides. They looked like the bones of prehistoric monsters, looming over us, waiting. It was surreal, Two worlds, untamed nature and a place built for cotton candy, should never exist side by side. It felt fundamentally wrong. Even the air was confused, a mix of pine needles, damp earth, and stale popcorn. Everyone was furious. My dad and his friends grumbled in low, bitter voices, complaining that this wasn't real camping, that the country was going soft, and of course, Charles couldn't keep quiet. "This isn't real camping," he kept saying, elbowing me with that smug grin, as if I needed reminding, as if I was the one who booked this ridiculous place. He was starting to get on my nerves, fast, mocking my family like we were clueless amateurs. Look, as much as I hated camping, I still knew what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be miserable, and miles away from civilization. This was a joke, a grotesque parody. I was getting sick of Charles, the perfect little Boy Scout, acting like I was part of the problem. Finally, I snapped. I told him to shut up. And thank God, he did. The situation was hopeless, but we'd already driven for over an hour. Turning back wasn't an option. Dusk had fallen, and none of the adults wanted to drive at night. We had no choice but to make the best of it. They sulked for another hour, grumbling under their breath, before finally unpacking and setting up camp. Every motion was stiff, forced, heavy with quiet resentment. And of course, this was Charles's moment to shine. It was like flipping a switch. He turned into a completely different person. Sure, it might have been glamping, but a tent still needed pitching, and he'd make sure it was flawless. Within minutes, our tent stood tall and perfect. Every knot, every peg, every rainfly pulled tight, textbook Boy Scout precision. Even my dad, the man who believed compliments were only for deathbeds, gave a curt nod of approval. And I'll admit, that tiny gesture, that rare bit of respect my dad showed toward my friend, made something inside me twist uncomfortably. Charles and I shared a tent. After a miserable dinner cooked on a mini gas stove, we slipped away under the usual excuse, organizing our gear. The adults, too busy complaining, waved us off without a second thought. The truth was, Charles had brought some supplies. Hidden in his bag was a small metal pipe and a crumpled bag of weed, tucked neatly into an old Altoids tin. Nothing wild, just a little something to take the edge off the boredom. Now, you have to understand, we were at that age, restless, reckless, desperate to do something we weren't supposed to. Not really rebellious, but it gave us that illusion of control, like we were steering our own lives for once. I don't touch that stuff anymore. Sometimes I wonder if I only did it back then to rebel against my dad's whole tough man ideals. Anyway, we snuck into the small patch of woods behind the fence, just far enough that the smell wouldn't carry. We smoked, giggled, feeling like secret geniuses. Neither of us worried about getting caught. We planned to stay in the tent all night anyway. When we crawled back, the world had softened, slower, hazier. We lay in our sleeping bags, trash-talking everyone and everything, until we realized something. We weren't tired. The high didn't make us sleepy. It made us restless. Charles rolled over. In the faint light filtering through the tent, I could see that sly grin of his. I knew that grin. He wanted to explore. I groaned. Explore what? The bleach-soaked bathroom. But then I noticed he wasn't looking around the campsite. He was looking past it. "You mean?" I started. He pointed toward the massive, silent steel skeletons in the dark. The amusement park. Excitement flared through me. "Piece of cake," he whispered. "We could climb to the top of that roller coaster." Climbing was our thing. Water towers, abandoned houses, anything tall and stupid. But a roller coaster? That was a whole new level. We waited. We lay still, listening. The low murmur of my dad's friends swapping old stories. Their laughter fading, tent zippers, and finally, the steady rhythm of snoring. It was late. The campground had gone completely silent. We moved, grabbed a flashlight, a water bottle, and slipped out of the tent, straight to the fence. Just a regular chain link barrier. Charles crouched. I climbed. And within seconds, we were inside. The darkness swallowed everything, but it wasn't quiet. There was a low, mechanical hum, steady, constant, and every now and then, a faint electric whine. Security. They were patrolling in golf carts. It felt like a stealth video game. Every sense sharpened. Every shadow was cover. Every open space a death zone. We crept between the shuttered game booths, through the stale smells of popcorn, burnt sugar, machine grease, and the stuffed animals, prizes, hung limp from their hooks. In the dark, their glass eyes seemed to follow us. Suddenly, a spotlight swept across the midway. A golf cart. We bolted, sprinting across an open lot, diving behind an empty Dippin' Dot stand, hearts pounding, breath shallow. We froze as the cart rolled by less than 30 feet away. It was exhilarating and terrifying. A game, sure, but we both knew what would happen if we got caught. Being dragged back to camp, my dad's face. That would be the real nightmare. Finally, we reached the base of the roller coaster. Up close. It was a monster, tangled black steel bones against the night sky. We found the maintenance stairs running alongside the main track. Without a word, we started climbing. Each step made a hollow metallic clang, no matter how soft we tried to be. Every sound felt like betrayal, echoing into the night. Halfway up, the stairs ended. We had to step out onto the narrow catwalk meant for maintenance workers. No railing, just a strip of metal about 3 feet wide, and on either side, nothing but air. A straight drop of 100 feet onto solid concrete. The wind whipped around us. My stomach flipped. I didn't dare look down. I locked my eyes on Charles's heels, clutching the flashlight so tight my knuckles went white. And then we made it. The very top. The view was unreal. The entire park spread out below us, a sea of black shapes. The campground flickered like dying embers. Beyond that, the town, fast asleep. We felt like kings. We took one picture. Just one. Honestly, I wish we'd taken more. But even we knew, one flash up here would be a beacon. Time to head down. Luck never lasts forever, and the climb down was even worse. When my boots finally hit the ground, I let out a shaky laugh of relief. We started back, creeping through the same path. Strangely, it felt easier now. Maybe fewer guards. Maybe we were just cockier. We were only minutes from the fence when we froze again. Another golf cart, coming straight toward us. We dove behind a big snack stand, pressing ourselves against the darkest part of the wall. That's when I saw it. Movement. Across the path, deep in the shadows. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks, or the golf cart's lights. Then Charles elbowed me, hard. He'd seen it too. I squinted into the dark, and I saw it. About 30 feet away, half hidden between two buildings, someone else. They were crouched low, just like us, like they were hiding from the guards too. But it wasn't a kid. And the worst part, the part that froze my blood, was that I was sure they were looking right at us. Real fear hit me. The game was over. Trapped between the guards and that. We had nowhere to run. No way out. I locked my eyes on the figure. They moved. They darted across the open plaza, just for a second, passing through a sliver of weak lamplight. It was a man. His clothes were torn, filthy. His movements jerky, off balance, like he was badly hurt. But what chilled me to the core was the dark, wet stuff smeared all over his face. It wasn't mud. It was shiny, thick. It looked like blood. It was smeared across his mouth, his cheeks, wildly, like he'd wiped it on with his own hands. Charles saw it too. I heard him choke back a gasp. We looked at each other, eyes wide with pure animal terror. And then, the man vanished, slipped into the shadows between the buildings, and was gone. The electric hum of the guard's golf cart faded into the distance. And then silence. A thick, suffocating kind of silence. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. We ran. It wasn't a calculated retreat. It was pure animal panic. No more creeping in the shadows or careful, quiet steps. We tore across the open courtyards, shoes pounding against the cracked pavement, each thud echoing like gunfire in that nightmare stillness. I kept glancing over my shoulder, flashlight beam jerking wildly, slicing through the darkness in frantic arcs. I was convinced, utterly convinced, that something was behind us, watching, following. I could almost feel it, the rasp of breath, the limp, uneven shuffle closing in behind my heels. But every time I looked, nothing. Just the twisted steel bones of the Ferris wheel, towering like some giant insect frozen mid-hunt, and that sickly, sweet stench of old carnival sugar hanging in the air, gone sour with age. We reached the fence, clawed, and stumbled over it, clumsy, desperate, almost tumbling headfirst into the safety of the campground on the other side. No victory laughter, no adrenaline high. All I wanted was to crawl into our flimsy, nylon fortress and hide. Charles's face in the moonlight was chalk white, almost spectral. The terror in his eyes wasn't about getting caught anymore. It was something deeper. When we zipped up this tent, that thin layer of fabric suddenly felt like a bomb shelter. But we both knew it was a lie. No one mentioned sleep. We just lay there, fully dressed, hearts hammering against our ribs, each trapped inside our own racing thoughts. Probably just a homeless guy, Charles finally whispered, voice cracking, doing God knows what. It was a pathetic explanation. We both knew it. But it was the only rope our teenage brains could grab onto, something, anything, to keep from drowning in real fear. Sure, a homeless person might sneak into a park, but they don't crouch in the dark, watching, and they don't smear blood across their faces. We stayed frozen for hours, listening. Every sound, the crickets around, the rustle of leaves, the cough from a nearby tent, became him. He was out there, finishing what he'd started. Morning came with a horrifying sense of normalcy. Sunlight, fresh air, the chatter of my dad's friends arguing about coffee. We crawled out, hands trembling so badly we could barely hold our forks. Packed our fishing gear in silence. The sunlight was too bright, too clean. It made the night before feel like some twisted dream dissolving in daylight. But around 10 a.m., that illusion shattered. A young park ranger approached our campsite, face pale as paper. He tried to sound calm, but his voice kept breaking. "Attention, everyone," he said, clearing his throat. "There's been an incident." A man had been found, stabbed to death, last night. The body was discovered near a lake, about 4 miles away. The killer was still on the loose. The sheriff had ordered all rangers within 50 miles to be on high alert. Then the ranger read the description. My blood didn't just run cold, it froze solid. They were looking for a disheveled white male, late 30s, shirtless, possibly bleeding, or with blood on his clothes. Immediately after, the ranger ordered everyone to pack up and evacuate. No questions, no debate. For our safety, he said. The entire campground was being cleared. Charles and I just stared at each other. The world tilted. We didn't need to say a word. The pieces fell into place on their own. "The limp," I whispered. He was hurt. "Bleeding," Charles muttered. "Ragged clothes. Blood on his..." Not just on his clothes. It was on his face. The man we saw. The man who saw us. We kept our mouths shut. We tore down the tent in a silent, feverish panic. Didn't tell my dad. Didn't tell the ranger. Didn't tell the cops stationed at the exit. their lights flickering blue and red against the trees. And to this day, I don't know why. You can judge me. You'd be right to. But back then, I was more afraid of getting grounded than anything else. Telling the truth meant admitting where we'd been, that we'd trespassed, smoked weed, climbed a goddamn roller coaster at 2 in the morning. In the stupid, selfish brain of a teenager, the fear of punishment somehow outweighed the duty to do the right thing. I still hate myself for it. Maybe if we'd said something, they would have caught him. Maybe someone else wouldn't have died. Charles and I stayed friends. We went to the same school, worked in the same town. There's a bond between us, dark, heavy. That night became our unspoken secret. Honestly, I think Charles carries more guilt than I do. He was a Boy Scout, taught to do the right thing. I was just the idiot who followed. And yet, even after all these years, one thought still keeps me awake at night. The thought that makes me double-check every lock, every window before bed. I keep wondering, what would have happened if we had met him? If the guard's golf cart hadn't rolled by at that exact moment? We always assume that man was hiding from security, just like us. But what if he wasn't? What if he wasn't hiding at all? This happened in October of 2016. You remember that fall rush, right? That weird, surreal, almost unreal fall. The one where the whole country fell into a kind of collective hysteria. The clown craze. It felt like the entire world had lost its mind. Every day, social media blew up with another shaky phone video. A shadowy figure at the edge of the woods. Someone standing motionless under a flickering yellow streetlight. Just standing there, staring. Most of it, of course, turned out to be hoaxes, sick pranks. But hidden among all that garbage, a few cases were real. Disturbingly real. The kind that make your skin crawl. And my story is one of those. I was 16 that year, a junior in high school, living in New York. After my last class, biology, the most mind-numbing lab ever, I said goodbye to my friends and did what I always did, hopped on the 6 train. I knew that route like the back of my hand, muscle memory. But that day, something was off. The car was nearly empty. In New York, you have to understand, an empty subway car is a red flag. It means disaster, a lunatic, or a smell so bad it could kill. But almost empty, that's worse. It's unsettling. It's quiet in a way that feels wrong, like the whole city's holding its breath. Just me and 2, maybe 3 others, each sealed off in their own little bubble. And me, of course I didn't notice. Why would I? Earbuds jammed in, music blasting, probably Drake. Hey, it was 2016. The bass thumped in my chest, sealing me completely off from the world. Worse, my eyes were glued to my phone, studying for chemistry. You can picture it, right? No hearing, no awareness, just a glowing rectangle filling my entire vision. In other words, I was a perfect target. I know, walking alone like that, oblivious, it's stupid. But I knew the area. I knew this train. I told myself I'd be fine. I planned to hop off at 96th, walk home. Just another dull Wednesday. That's the most dangerous lie we tell ourselves, isn't it? That familiar means safe. And then everything fell apart. Fast. Too fast. The momentum of the train shifted. The familiar ding-dong announcing the next stop was just a ghost, drowned out completely by the music in my ears. 96th Street. I sprang up from my seat on instinct. Head down, eyes glued to my phone. Music still roaring. A machine on autopilot, moving toward the doors. The brakes screeched, and the doors slid open. And instantly, my world stopped. Something was blocking the way. I looked up, and my blood froze. Not someone. A clown. And I don't mean the kind you see at birthday parties. I mean a full getup, hideous and filthy. Oversized rainbow pants, faded and sagging, a grimy yellow shirt, and those huge red shoes, crushed and cracked, like they'd been stomped on 1,000 times. But everything about him was wrong. The makeup, thick, ghostly white, was smeared on like plaster, cracked and glistening, as if applied with a trowel. And the wig wasn't there. Instead, his real hair showed through, dark, matted, slick with sweat. Somehow, that tiny detail made it 1,000 times worse. It made him real. I froze. My heart didn't just pound. It felt like it was dunked in ice. Until that exact moment, I'd never been so close to something so wrong, so violently out of place in reality. And his eyes, beneath those ridiculous painted eyebrows, were flat, dead, completely devoid of humor or life. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through me. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stood there, a silent, awful statue, nearly 6 feet tall, blocking the way out. The other passengers, far down the car, didn't notice. It was just me and him. The door's closing chime shrieked, a siren cutting through even my music. 5 seconds. I had 5 seconds before I'd be trapped in there with yums. Adrenaline slammed through me. "Excuse me," I muttered, trying to squeeze past. The moment my arm brushed that rough, faded fabric, he bent down. It wasn't a human movement. It was smooth, snake-like, like a puppet on invisible strings. His face stopped inches from mine, and the smell hit me. Rotting sweat, heavy face paint, and the sharp, metallic tang of old pennies. I didn't wait for him to make a move. I shoved, hard, and bolted out of the train. He roared, lunging after me, his fingers grazing the edge of my jacket. But I tore free. I didn't think. I just ran. And he started chasing me. The platform was empty, 3:30 in the afternoon, but it felt abandoned, like the surface of the moon. I was completely alone, and I could hear him. God, I could hear him. It wasn't footsteps. It was that awful, wet flap, flap, flap of those oversized red shoes slapping the concrete, echoing through the tunnel like a nightmare heartbeat. I risked a glance back. He was coming for me. His run was wrong, jerky, broken, limbs flailing like a marionette with cut strings, but he was fast. He was closing the distance. And that's when my eyes locked on his hand. Something had appeared there, something that hadn't been there before. A kitchen knife, not a prop, not a toy, real. A dull metal blade catching the sickly yellow light of the subway. And I saw it, that cold, glow metallic gleam. I don't know where he hid that knife. I don't even know what he wanted, though, honestly. When a clown with a knife is chasing a 16-year-old kid, it's not hard to guess. But in that moment, I didn't care. The sight of that blade was a jolt. Pure, undiluted adrenaline burning through me stronger than fear itself. I didn't just run. I flew. I hit the stairs, shoes skidding on slick tiles. I grabbed the rail, hauling myself up, 3 steps at a time. My lungs were on fire. Around me, there was no sound except my own ragged, wet breathing. And behind me, that flap, flap, flap. His shoes. He wasn't giving up. A horrifying thought flashed through my mind. Dear God, he's going to follow me home. I crashed into the turnstile, hip slamming metal with a loud clang, and burst out onto the street. And then, everything stopped. Just like that. Over. The sun was still shining. Cars honked. People walked by, carrying groceries, talking on their phones, living, normal, unbothered. The contrast hit me so hard it made me dizzy. I stumbled, doubled over, gasping for air, staring down into that black mouth of the subway I'd just escaped from. Empty. He hadn't followed. Daylight and the noise of the city was a barrier he wouldn't cross. But I was still shaking, trembling so hard I could barely unlock my phone. My fingers slipped as I dialed 911, I can only imagine how pathetic my voice must have sounded, a breathless, cracking 16-year-old trying to explain the impossible. There's someone at 96th Street, a clown. He's got a knife. He chased me. A long pause on the other end. A clown, sir? I remember screaming. Yes, a clown, a freaking clown. Send someone. To their credit, they did. Officers went down there, hands on their holsters. But I already knew what they'd find. Nothing. He was gone. They searched the platform, the tunnels, the bathrooms. He'd melted into the darkness of the subway system, like he'd never existed at all. One cop, trying to calm me down, patted my shoulder. Probably just some nutcase kid, getting in on that stupid trend. He's long gone. But long gone didn't make me feel safe. That poisonous thought stuck with me. That somehow he knew where I lived. That it wasn't random. That he'd been waiting for me. And that he'd come back. Of course, that never happened. Nothing ever did. My story was probably just one tiny footnote on the evening news, buried under the flood of creepy clown sightings, 2016. I wouldn't know. I never watched him. It took weeks to bury it, but I never really got over it. For a year after, I never got off at 96th Street again. I'd rather overshoot my stop, or get off early and walk an extra mile. And I never wore earbuds on the subway again. Every ride that my head was on a swivel. My eyes scanned every passenger, my whole body coiled and ready to bolt. What that clown took from me wasn't just a few minutes of my day. He took my habits. He took the sense of safety that familiarity once gave me. He shredded it, left nothing but cold, paralyzing fear. The realization that the monsters you see on the news aren't always in someone else's town. Sometimes they're waiting for you at your own stop. This isn't your typical horror story. No ghosts, no haunted house, at least, not in the usual sense. But I promise you, what I went through is worth hearing. Because the monsters I met were completely real. And I walked straight into their den, wide-eyed, blinded by greed. It all started about 2 years after I got my bachelor's degree. I was 27, technically enrolled in some online post-grad certification program. But honestly, that was just resume decoration. The truth was, I had too much free time, and not in a good way. I was drifting. You know that feeling? That strange limbo after graduation, where your education is too much for the jobs you can get, and your experience is too little for the jobs you want. During that phase, I hopped from one dead-end gig to another, desperate to fill the time, and, more importantly, make some money. My student loans were coming due, and panic was setting in. To put it bluntly, Indeed was both my best friend and my worst enemy. I scrolled through listings every night, the blue light from my phone shining on a future that looked more hopeless by the minute. I was so tired of running food deliveries across the same 6 neighborhoods, the stale smell of cold fries permanently soaked into my car, all for minimum wage and tips that barely covered gas. I felt like a rat in a maze built to crush my will, so I decided it was time for a change. Anything different. One night, as I was doom scrolling Indeed, my thumb hovering over yet another delivery job, I stumbled across something strange. The title was simple: Private Lifeguard Needed. It was for a hotel a few towns over, a place I'd driven past before but never paid attention to. Nothing unusual about that, right? I had certification. I could swim. It seemed perfect. But as I read the description, a few small, weird details jumped out at me. Not just weird, alarming. First, the hours. They were reversed, completely upside down. You'd expect a hotel pool to open in the morning, maybe 9 or 10 a.m., and close at dusk. Maybe 8 p.m. in the summer. But this one, the exact opposite. They wanted someone to operate and monitor the pool from 05 Maya to 1 on weekdays, a night shift, for a swimming pool. Who swims in a hotel pool at 1 in the morning on a Tuesday? It felt unnatural, like a place meant for sunlight and laughter was being repurposed for something that belonged to the dark. But that wasn't even the strangest part. Not by a long shot. Further down, in the requirements section, past the CPR certification and reliable transportation, was a line that made me stop cold. They specifically required someone who did not speak Spanish. Let me say that again, because I had to reread it 3 times. They explicitly wanted someone who, under no circumstances, could speak Spanish. Here's the thing. I'd spoken Spanish since I was a kid. I'm half Mexican. My mom spoke only Spanish to me growing up, and that town where the hotel was located, predominantly Spanish-speaking. You couldn't walk into a grocery store without hearing it. So the requirement made 0 sense. Why would they deliberately want someone who couldn't communicate with most of the locals? I remember just staring at the screen, trying to come up with a rational reason. But there was one detail that made me push all that unease away. A detail that worked like a sedative, strong enough to silence every alarm in my head. The pay? $30s an hour. This was years ago. $30 an hour back then, for a guy in my position, it was like stumbling on a gold brick. Life-changing money. Debt-clearing money. Stop feeling like a failure. Money. Needless to say, I ignored all the red flags. I decided to overlook the vampire hours and the sketchy, possibly discriminatory requirement. I decided to focus on the number. And right then, I made a decision. I'd just pretend I didn't know Spanish. What were they going to do? Give me a pop quiz? It seemed like a small, harmless lie. The first of many. The job must have been brand new, or had an extremely high turnover rate. Gee, I wonder why. Because I got a reply and an interview within hours. Fast forward to day 1. I drove to the hotel. It wasn't part of a chain. One of those older, independent places trying hard to look fancier than it was. Everything looked exactly how you'd expect. A little dated, but clean. I walked in, and this stocky guy looked Mexican, probably in his 40s, stepped out of the back office to greet me. Big smile. We exchanged info, cracked some jokes, laughed. He was genuinely friendly, kind of goofy even. His easygoing attitude put me at ease. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But as we were walking through the courtyard toward the pool, another man, taller, appeared from around a corner and stopped and stared. He was lean, wearing a tight polo shirt, and his eyes didn't just look at you. They looked through you. I could tell instantly that I was being evaluated. The tension that had melted away moments earlier snapped right back. I started wondering if the friendly guy was just part of the act. Good cop, bad cop. The tall guy walked straight up to me. No smile, no handshake, no greeting. He just stood uncomfortably close and started talking to me. In Spanish. A quick, casual stream of Spanish. Small talk about the weather, the heat, whether I was ready for summer. My blood froze. I knew exactly what this was. A test. He was trying to see if I understood. The job posting wasn't a joke, it was a rule. And this man was the gatekeeper. I stared at him blankly, the most convincingly confused. I don't understand face I could manage, even though I caught every single word. He wasn't saying anything strange. It was his tone. Watching my eyes, searching for the tiniest flicker of recognitions. My heart pounded. I felt like a spy about to blow my cover. After a few, painfully, the first week was actually pretty chill. Well, the first few weeks, really. Working those hours was weird, sure, but after a while, it became routine. Under the hotel's harsh sodium lights, the pool looked different at night. It wasn't a place of laughter or splashing anymore, just a sterile blue rectangle glowing in the dark. The only sounds were the steady, mechanical thump, thump, thump of the filter pump and the sharp, chemical tang of chlorine hanging heavy in the damp air. There were more people using the pool than I'd expected. Families usually packed up around 9 p.m. But after that, a different kind of clientele started showing up. I collected the fees, made sure no one was running or diving, and kept my eyes on the water. It was a job, and for $30 an hour, I'd have done it in a snowstorm. During that first month, nobody showed me a wristband. That heavy metal door, the pool house, stayed locked, a silent, ominous block of concrete sitting there, like a sleeping giant. I almost convinced myself it was just storage, and Hefei's strange rule was just one of his quirks. I was wrong. The first time someone flashed the wristband was about a month in. A regular Tuesday, just after 11 p.m., a big Hispanic guy in a crisp white button-down, wearing sunglasses, at night, walked straight toward my station. He didn't even glance at the pool. He wasn't there to swim. He moved with purpose. He stopped in front of me, eyes hidden, saying nothing. Then, slowly, he lifted his arm. A simple blue plastic wristband, the kind you'd see at a fair, gleamed under the pool light. He just held it there, silent. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. I nodded, tried to look bored, climbed down from the stand, and walked over to the bunker-like door. I fumbled for the heavy key Hefe had given me, slid it into the lock, and turned it. The click echoed unnaturally loud in the night air. I pulled the door open. Inside, nothing but darkness. A gust of cold, stale air hit my face. The man gave me a short nod and stepped inside without a word, vanishing into the pitch-black interior. The door, fireproof, self-closing, swung shut behind him with a thud that sounded final, like a tomb ceiling. The lock clicked automatically. I went back to my stand, my mind spinning. What the hell was in there? About an hour later, I heard the click again. The man emerged, walking fast toward the exit. I didn't have to say anything, but I watched him go. His black JanSport backpack, plain, ordinary, was noticeably bulkier than before. The seams were stretched tight. He didn't look back. After that, the floodgates opened. More and more people started showing me wristbands, sometimes 1 or 2, sometimes entire groups of 5 or 6, all men, all serious. None of them there to swim. At the same time, more guests started using the pool. The cash box filled up faster than I could count. Pretty soon, I realized I was taking in way too much money. For example, entry was $10, but someone would peel off a crisp 100 from a thick roll, press it into my hand, and say, "Keep the change," before I could even respond. That happened 5, 10, 15 times a night. Every shift, I was handling thousands in cash. I finally called Hefe, genuinely worried I was doing something wrong, that the numbers wouldn't match. He answered on the second ring. "Hefe, it's me. Listen, people are overpaying, a lot. I've got almost $2,000 here, and it's only 10 o'clock. What do you want me to do with it?" There was a pause. Then, a short, dry laugh. "Don't worry, my friend," he said. "Rich people get confused all the time. It's just part of the business." I could tell he didn't want to talk more than necessary. He hung up before I could even finish my sentence. Out of all the shady things happening, that short, harmless-sounding call confirmed it for me. It was his tone, that cold, casual, part of the business. That's when it hit me. I was involved in something way bigger than lifeguarding. It wasn't until I hung up that the full weight of it sank in. My mind started tuning out everything, the water, the pump, the noise, until only one word pulsed in my head like a neon sign I couldn't turn off. Money laundering. The pool was a front. The entry fees were cover. didn't know what to do. Part of me, my gut, was screaming to get out, that I was deep in something dangerous, but another part couldn't let go. How could I? $30 an hour, plus hundreds in tips every night? I rationalized it. I'm just a lifeguard. I'm not inside the pool house. My hands are clean. So I kept my mouth shut, and I kept working. But after that moment, I started connecting dots. The pool house was clearly where the real business happened. Illegal gambling, drugs, maybe worse. Whatever it was happening right behind me, every night, behind that locked doors. The regulars began warming up to me, especially the wristband guys. They weren't silent shadows anymore. They started calling me by name. "¿Qué tal, amigo?" they'd shout. "What's up, man?" I went from taking payments to getting tips, high fives, even friendly nods. And as they got comfortable with me, the harmless gringo lifeguard who didn't understand Spanish, they started talking, right in front of me. I caught fragments of their conversations. Paquetes, packages, jefes, bosses, territorio, territory. Every suspicion I had was confirmed. Still, the perks made ignoring it easy. I was making more money than I ever had. And my hands, technically, were still clean, right? I was hired to do a job, and that's what I was doing. And speaking of the job, I actually had to do it one night. A few days later, a kid almost drowned. Nothing heroic, just a boy who drifted too far into the deep end and clearly couldn't swim. He panicked, flailing, sinking. I blew my whistle, dove in, and pulled him out. Classic textbook rescue. When I surfaced, coughing and sputtering with the kid in my arms, everyone, families, guests, even a few of the serious guys near the gate, stood and clapped. It was surreal. Then Hefe came running from somewhere inside the hotel, pale and frantic. He grabbed me, pulled me into a hug so tight I swear he cracked a rib. He was trembling, eyes wet. "You saved my son," he said. "I owe you my life." I didn't realize it until he said it. The kid I just rescued was his son. The next day, Hefe, Esteban, and a few others, some of them the wristband men, were waiting at the gate for me. Hefe had a bottle of expensive liquor and a stack of glasses. They poured one for me. It felt good. I felt like a hero. I felt accepted. But that feeling didn't last. After everyone toasted to our lifeguard, Hefe said something, and another man, one I hadn't seen before, with cold, dead eyes, raised his glass too. He spoke in Spanish. I don't remember the exact words, but it wasn't a cheerful toast. He was congratulating us on how much money they were making. And then, he said, "Y a todas las vidas que estamos destruyendo," and to all the lives we're destroying. Everyone laughed. A loud, genuine, joyful laugh. And they drank. My blood went cold. My smile froze as I lifted the glass to my lips, their laughter echoing in my head. That was the moment I realized I was addicted to something deeply corrupt. No amount of money or praise could justify staying there as long as I did. I wasn't just a bystander. I was an accomplice. And the worst part? I stayed. That toast, and to all the lives we're destroying. Those words, and the laughter that followed, stuck in my head all the next day. They burrowed deep, like a parasite nesting in my skull. I sat on my tall lifeguard chair, earning $30 an hour plus tips, and suddenly felt filthy, contaminated. I wasn't a bystander anymore. I was a beneficiary. The thought made me sick. The next day, while I was at the pool, my mom called. Now, you have to understand something. My mom, God rest her soul, never called unless it was important. She wasn't a chatterbox. It was one of those unspoken rules in my life. If I saw her name on my screen, I answered. I blew a short, sharp whistle to quiet down some rowdy teens, climbed down from my post, and headed for a small recess in the wall half hidden between a vending machine and an ice dispenser. It was away from the main deck, away from the pool entrance, private, secluded, safe. Or so I thought. I picked up. My mom only ever spoke Spanish. It was the language of our home, my childhood, my memories. Naturally, I spoke to her in Spanish, too. The conversation was ordinary, something about a cousin's quinceañera, I think. I don't even remember the reason she called us. What I do remember, vividly, horrifyingly, is what I felt right after I said, "Te quiero, mamá, adios." I hung up, took a deep breath of chlorine-scented air, and turned around. And Esteban was there, standing in the doorway of that little alcove, blocking my way, staring. No, waiting. He leaned against the opposite wall, arms crossed, completely silent. Gone was the goofy, friendly guy I'd met my first day. The jokes, the warmth, they were gone. His face was stone, cold, calculating. The good cop act was over. We just stood there, staring at each other. The silence was so thick, it felt like drowning. My lungs begged for air. Finally, after what felt like forever, he asked, in perfect, accentless English, "How long?" Just that. How long? My blood didn't just freeze. It solidified. My brain shut down. The entire house of cards I'd built on one stupid lie was collapsing. What? I stammered. My voice cracked. How long for what? How long? He repeated, his tone flat and dead. You've understood Spanish. I tried to laugh. A pathetic, nervous bark that died in my throat. Oh, that? Haha. No, I was just, practicing. A friend's been teaching me. You know, just trying to learn. It was the worst lie I'd ever told. It died right there, between us. He saw through it. I knew he did. He didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't move. He just stared, silent, assessing. But I could tell, he wasn't thinking about what I said. He was calculating. His eyes were locked on mine, but his mind was elsewhere, running numbers, weighing options, measuring risks. And I realized, with bone-deep certainty, that he was deciding, right then and there, whether or not to hurt me, to eliminate the problem. After what felt like an eternity, he finally said, "All right." Just that. One word, but it was the most terrifying sound I'd ever heard. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It was acknowledgement. It meant, got it. Conversation overs. He turned and walked away. And I went straight back to my chair, legs shaking so badly I had to drag myself up the ladder. I sat there, paralyzed. I wasn't a lifeguard anymore. I was a liability, a witness. I thought about leaving, running to my car, and never coming back, but I couldn't move. Leaving would look guilty. They had my address on file, my car make, my license plate. They knew who I was, and I knew who they were. The life destroyers. Every paranoid thought spiraled at once as I sat frozen in that plastic chair, gripping the armrests until my knuckles turned white. A few minutes before my shift ended, just before 1 a.m., Esteban returned. He walked up to the base of my chair and waited until I looked down. "Jefe wants you in an hour early tomorrow," he said, voice perfectly flat. "He's got a new opportunity for you." A new opportunity. The blood that had just started flowing again froze solid. This wasn't a promotion. It wasn't a raise. It was a summons. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a fat roll of cash, peeled off 2 crisp hundreds, and held them up. "For doing a good job, he said. Then he slipped the bills into my hand and walked back toward the hotel. No goodbye, no glance back. I sat there until exactly 1 a.m. Then I climbed down, clocked out, and while